Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of My Words, Our Journey. Today, we're going to start with Chapter 29. Shawn made it to his hotel without incident. After leaving the smallest airstrip with directions to the hotel in hand, he headed straight over for a calming shower, a call home, and a fresh Detroit Lions t-shirt. With these few tasks completed, Shawn decided to take in what the town had to offer. There was no real plan, no roadmap to lead the way. Shawn just knew he was meant to be there and figured he had a small chance of something happening while he was in town. If not, it just wasn't meant to be, and he was fully prepared to live with that. He had scratched a few notes on his legal pad during the flight. Visit the sites of the two murders, stop by the office where Ryan Carver had been employed, and drop by the precinct and introduce himself. First, the restaurant, where a gentleman named Arnie was victim number one. Here, Shawn heard about the man that no one really wanted to speak bad about. He heard he was a good guy, and the never heard him say a bad word, things that he would have expected. But it was not until one of the bartenders was coming off duty that he heard something he found interesting. She had told Shawn how she watched the deceased and his wife on more than one occasion, and how that it did not appear they had a very good home life, and how she had noticed badly hidden bruises more than once when the couple had come in together. Shawn did not know what would end up being important, if anything, so as he returned to the rental car, he took down some notes, including, "Don't eat there. Place was filthy." Shawn had been walked through the kitchen area as he was taken to the manager's office and had noticed the lack of cleanliness. If he returned, it would be for follow-up only. Second, the man named Kevin, and unlike Arnie, those at the bowling alley that would discuss the dead bowler and part-time alley closer had very little good to say, other than they knew he was good at doing his job, keeping the beer flowing and keeping the balls from getting stuck in the rack. Other than that, there didn't seem to be any redeeming qualities about poor Fred. When the topic of spousal abuse did not come up voluntarily, Shawn had picked out one of the women who seemed to be in the know and more than eager to gossip to broach the subject with. It was clear she had no evidence of any direct kind of improprieties. Still, there had been plenty of rumors. Plenty. His only note, once he got back in the car after stop number 2, was, "Look at police reports on victims." Third, the office of Ryan Carver. There, no one wanted to speak, and that was okay, because his story had already been played out in the news, and the police reports, which Shawn had looked over twice, told him all he needed to know about the man that had left his wife beaten and in a coma, other than the small issue of where he was at this particular moment. It had been a long shot to learn anything new here, actually, but wasn't this whole adventure a long shot? Finally, the precinct. A brick building with a newly paved and lined parking lot, plenty of fall flowers still making the place look friendly enough, and 4 officers standing out front, enjoying the taste of nicotine. The receptionist had been cold at first. No one really knew how to handle Shawn when he introduced himself, and for a few moments he had regretted his decision to make his appearance known. That feeling subsided, however, when a jolly man looking about 70 came barreling into the waiting area. "I followed that there child predator case a while back. You the same Shawn Trammell?" He could not ask quick enough. "That depends on who you're rooting for." Shawn smiled and extended his right hand. "I like to always think I'm rooting for the side of justice, dear boy," leaving Shawn to draw his own conclusion. Back in the detective's small corner office, Shawn was brought up to speed on the investigation. There was little to go on other than the description from both murders had been identical, and the casings appeared to have come from the same weapon. Other than that, they had few theories and less leads. Shawn could sense the detectives was preparing to end their brief and uninformative meeting any moment, so he decided to ask the only real question he had. "Have you heard of either of the Vicks being less than respectful to their wives? I mean, this is a small town, right?" Shawn studied the man before him, not looking away, wanting to see how the detective would respond, wishing for the answer he desired, while not sure what it really meant in the big picture. "Where are you going with this, Mr. Trammell?" "Fair enough, detective. You have a missing husband, known to abuse his wife. You have 2 murderers. Both husbands, I've heard, may have been less than respectful to their spouses. Just wondering if there's any connection somehow. Shawn watched as his words tried to penetrate the thick skull of the man behind the desk. Finally, off the record, understood? Shawn nodded in agreement. Arnie and Fred were both upstanding gents in the community. As far as the law was concerned, never received a complaint from either wife. The detective stopped, determined how to word the remainder of his statement. That doesn't mean we didn't hear things on the street or in the bars. We just can't go around, you know, on rumors, can we? After a moment of awkward silence, the detective finished his thought. Just like I said, we've not had a complaint, not one on either fella. I don't even remember even hearing a speeding ticket. Like I said, two good old boys. Politely, Shawn excused himself. On his way out, the receptionist was kind enough to recommend a local place for dinner, where the waitress was just a little too friendly for his liking. A cook that looked like he had just wrestled a walrus in an oil spill stood behind a grill that everyone could see. Families enjoyed each other's company, and a filling meal for less than the price of a bag of chips and a soda in the city. A nice place to raise a family, from all indication. Besides the sudden rash of deaths, that is, Shawn thought, and had to remind himself. He had his notepad laying on the table to his left, wanting to add to his very short list of notes. He would have hoped to have had more written down after the stops he had made. Shawn was focused on the last note when the waitress leaned over at the top of his diet soda. He looked down at the yellow pad. Like he said, just two good old boys. It just felt like there was a little more to it than that. He had overheard a couple and their children talking about heading to the mall after they finished their ice cream cones, and he decided to inquire, with his eager-to-please waitress named Maggie, where the mall was. After such a filling and not-so-healthy meal, he thought it may be good to get a walk in. Besides, he enjoyed people watching. It relaxed him. When he pulled in the parking lot, he was taken a little off guard. It had never occurred to him the mall would be anything other than what he was used to. Shawn should have known better. Even in his short time in town, nothing was going to be as what he was used to. Laughing out loud, Shawn found himself a spot and decided to go in anyway. He wasn't sure what the building had originally been, but for now, there was a Walmart anchored on one side with a JCPenney, and on the other, it looked like a used bookstore. By the looks of the parking lot, it did look like the place to be. Chapter 30. Fred was less irritable than normal. Almost tolerable. Almost. Sandy had often wondered if their life together had been different, if the financial situation had been altered. As he walked through the aisles, picking up items, checking their prices, and placing them back on the shelves, he was like a child, not sure how to spend his limited and newfound wealth. Sandy was uninterested and restless equally. She knew Madison would be in place, waiting, ready for their departure. It would be simple and over before she knew it, if she could only get him out of the store. Shawn had been mildly amused by the traffic he watched pass his wooden bench seat. It was one thing he had found similar to the city. There was a wide cross-section of people passing by his line of sight. He had done 12 laps around the small plaza and found the bench in the center of the court, directly across from a hunting supply store. In the city, it'd be the store with the least amount of foot traffic. Here, it was just the opposite. Couples, families, buddies stocking up on hunting gear, and young couple carrying their bags. It was a constant stream in and out. One couple did catch his attention, though, a middle-aged man and a woman roughly the same age. He had seen it before, the way the man carried himself. He tried to convince people, "I'm the boss and she knows it," with his walk, while hers screamed, "I'm afraid," for good reason. Seeing it over and over again didn't make it any easier to swallow. A man that hit a woman was just beyond him. He continued to watch as they walked away from him towards the double doors everyone seemed to be using to exit the mall. A young boy sat down at the far side of his bench, with what appeared to be cotton candy distracting him for a moment. When he turned back, he watched as the couple turned left instead of right. Was there another exit? He had not noticed the store down that way when he had been walking, or no one else had gone that way, as a matter of fact. Hadn't a battered woman's husband disappeared to start this whole chain of events? Had the two women's husbands that had been murdered also been supposedly abusers? It had been implied, hadn't it? His thought process was crazy, wasn't it? How could he still think he could hop on a plane, sit in a mall, and solve the case within a day? Still, as the thoughts all shifted around inside his head, he found himself walking in that direction, walking towards where the couple had last been seen, walking more out of curiosity than anything. He was ready to leave anyways. Madison was alert, focused, and ready. The evening was cool, and she just wanted to get home to a warm shower. She had figured it would be over by now, and after the hour and a half she had waited, her bladder was ready to explode. The doors opened, and Madison jumped into her skin. The gun she was holding now came up to a shooting position, her eyes adjusted to the dim lighting and ready for action. She watched as Sandy and her victim walked towards her. Sandy looked scared to death. Madison had seen the look before. It would not detour her from her promise. Fred was clueless until he heard the shot and felt the blood instantly spread from beneath his shirt. Madison's shot had been on target. Fred was dead before he could let go of the new winter coat he had purchased on sale. She could hear Sandy screaming, shouting, and knew it was time to run. Unfortunately for everyone, she did not turn and begin her escape in time. A man had come through the exit door, stopped briefly, then turned from left to right, letting his eyes adjust to the change in the lighting. She watched him, unable to move, hoping he would turn and run back inside for help, praying he would. When she heard the words the man shouted, her blood turned to ice. How could an FBI agent be? How could he be out here now? She could tell his eyes hadn't fully adjusted and thought for a second of running. Only for a second. Because if he truly was some kind of an agent, she would be shot in the back before she made it to the wide opening of the parking lot. Dead, and no good to anyone. So without hesitation, Madison did the only thing she knew to do. She watched in horror as the projectile took a section out of the man's head. There had been no time for him to react. Even though his gun had been drawn, she was in the shadow and he had been the open. Unfair advantage goes to the murderer, she thought. Sandy began to scream louder, if that was possible, while running towards the fallen man, not her husband, but the stranger. There was no eye contact, no communication at all. Sandy ran one way and Madison the other, one to try and save a life, and the other to try to save her life. Chapter 31. Sandy had a problem. Several, if you really thought about it. First and foremost, how could she tell the police her story when this man could possibly wake up and make her out to be a liar? Crouched between the two bodies, she tried to force herself to think straight. If she failed, Sandy knew it would be over for all of them. Fred had died before hitting the cool pavement. The stranger, however, seemed to be breathing ever so slightly. Would it be better for this situation if he did die? That question kept creeping into her forethought, a question she believed she knew the answer to, but feared it anyways. Afraid to touch the body, she had moved close in and spoke to him, trying to see if his eyes moved and to see if he truly was breathing. She was sure there was something she should be doing, but Sandy had no clue what it was. That was not supposed to happen, she thought. Wishing this night could start over, she rose to her feet and made her way to the mall door. She had purposely left her cell phone at home, so she would have given Madison an extra few minutes or two to get away. Now she wanted help for the stranger more than almost anything in the world. Would she have spent another minute with Fred if this man could live? She wasn't sure of that, but she did feel guilty. Madison was traumatized. The outward signs were easy to see. The pale skin, the swollen eyes, and the incessant shaking made it clear she was in turmoil. It was things going on inside that really scared her the most, though. She had been pushed to murder, pushed to death. Had she killed the stranger? Was there any way he could have survived? Why hadn't she aimed higher just to scare him? How was poor Sandy handling the bizarre twist? Question after question, not one answer. She would not be able to communicate with anyone within the circle until it was over. That had been stressed over and over again. Probably now more than ever, they needed to be careful. Using the left sleeve of her blouse to wipe away the tears, Madison wondered if she truly was now a cop killer. If she was, she knew the stakes had just gotten much higher. It was no secret in this part of the country what happened to those that killed an officer of the law. Through the newspaper, probably within the next day or two, she would know if the last task would take place, or if their mission was to be put on hold or canceled completely. At this point, any of the above would be fine with her. The stranger, she felt sorry for him. But it was her firm belief everything happened for a reason. He was meant to be in that alley at that moment, and she was meant to shoot him. He was meant to be there, she thought. Even with that revelation, the struggle to want to live, the energy she had to exert just to breathe, was intense. There was no thought of Fred during her personal ordeal. And days later, she would find that ironic. He was the only one she knew for sure was dead, and he had never crossed her mind. Was it the fact the stranger was the law, or an innocent man caught in their deadly game? Madison wasn't sure, but if she had to guess, she'd say it was partly both. As the cool air hit his face, it was somewhat of a surprise. The temperature had dropped considerably since he had entered the mall earlier. It felt good, though, in a strange way, as if it was washing over him, giving him a completely refreshed feeling somehow. He stopped just outside the door to take in the sensation, trying to let his eyes adjust to the sudden and drastic change in lighting. From the shadow, Shawn could make out the outline of what appeared to be a body on the ground. With some effort, he spotted the woman standing still not far from where the form had fallen. It was impossible to tell if it was the couple from the mall. Before he could take the next step, Shawn simultaneously spotted the third figure looming in the shadows. Reaching for his weapon and shouting he was with the FBI, and they were to freeze. If he would have stayed put, the shooter would have been shooting blind. Instead, Shawn moved forward, trying to get a better angle. He was exposed. Without warning or thought, Shawn went down hard, not like in the movies, where it shows the victim struggling, staggering to maintain composure. No, more like a bag of concrete dropped from the back of a truck. Never feeling the woman by his side or hearing the sirens or medical personnel methodically working to save the stranger to their town. Never seeing a bright light, never having a warm sensation take over his body, never leaving his badly damaged form to look down from above. No, just nothing. Chapter 32. Leonard felt a vibration in his jacket pocket, telling him he had a call coming in. It was his lunchtime, his time, and he was enjoying it with a boating magazine he had skimmed through twice already. Half a tuna sub with lettuce and mayo from Tank's House of Subs, and an unsweet tea he had been working on all morning. His time. Even when the next, longer vibration indicated he had a new voicemail, he still continued to flip the pages, looking for an advertisement he had seen earlier. It was an ad for a marina somewhere in Florida. He wanted to get the 800 number and call for a brochure. But when the vibration started again, he could not continue to ignore the fact somebody needed to speak to him now. It was Kenny that had left the message. 2 sentences in to the call, he stopped listening. He had heard enough. Shawn had been shot in the head. Kenny had been fixing 2 bowls of cereal and 2 small bowls of cut fruit for a late breakfast, early lunch. Rachel had spent the night for the first time, and he wanted to give her reason to stay longer. The night had been wonderful. A great dinner with a beautifully funny and intelligent woman who was way out of his league. A night spent getting to know one another. And it finally ended with a goodnight kiss standing outside his spare bedroom door. They had had 1 too many glasses of wine, and Rachel was in no shape to drive. She had retired around 2:30 in the morning. Kenny had taken a long, lukewarm shower, and his head hit the pillow around 3. He was in this one for the long haul. When Joe rang, he answered on the second ring. Like a NASCAR going from nearly 200 miles an hour to 0 when it hits the outside wall, Kenny went from the clouds to the pits. Shawn's wife was hysterical, unable to clearly communicate, eager to get the information across and get off the phone and on to her next call. Shawn was in a coma after being shot in the head outside a mall in a small town in southwest Virginia. Jill took the time to explain to Kenny why Shawn had been there to the best of her ability. He had written down a partial name and address of the hospital along with the room number, 1027. Not wanting to keep Jill any longer than necessary, he decided he could call and get the rest of the information he needed after he called Leonard and broke the news. Jill was organizing her recipes and cleaning out her catch-all drawer in the kitchen when the call came in. The phone had been buried under old billing statements, a collection of rubber bands, paper clips, sticky notes, an assortment of pens and pencils that she could never find when she needed one. The man on the other end of the phone had made similar calls before. He had just the right tone, words, and sincerity when he gave Jill the devastating report on her husband. She could tell he did not enjoy that part of his job, but she could also understand why someone had decided he would be good at it. Jill had made 4 calls as she packed a small but functional travel bag. Her mother, their preacher, Shawn's detective friend Kenny Costco, and her work. She was working on pure desire to get to him, with a kind of high-speed cruise control taking over as she closed down their home, handled the calls, packed, even wrote a note to stop the mail and newspaper delivery, threw away a casserole that wouldn't be good in 2 days. She had locked the door behind her as she prayed a short but emotional prayer. Let me bring my Shawn home alive. Shawn was walking through traffic down a busy side street. While he could see the hustle and bustle of a big city all around him, he could not hear a thing. The construction equipment, as it went on about its work, silent. The taxis inching by, silent. And the crowd around him, silent. Shawn tried to make eye contact, tried to start a conversation. Not one person acknowledged him. Everyone appeared to be heading in the same direction, with a determined purpose, so strong that if one was to stop abruptly, he or she may be trampled. Feeling he needed to be nowhere else, Shawn went with the flow, curious to see what was at the end. Ahead, on a large flashing marquee, today only, for one show only, The Slayer, with several exclamation points. It appeared that's where everyone was headed. As the mass started to turn towards the entrance of the building, Shawn noticed no one was selling or buying tickets. They were just entering, 2 by 2. Once inside, he could hear the blaring music through the enormous speakers positioned throughout the auditorium. It was neither soothing nor abrasive, just there, and way too loud. Finding a seat between an elderly man and a middle-aged woman, Shawn sat down and waited. Still, no one made any attempt at conversation or even eye contact. Looking straight ahead, now worried he shouldn't be there, trying to gauge if he had time to make it back outside before the show began, deciding it was worth a try, not sure why, but realizing staying wouldn't be in his best interest, Shawn stood to make his exit. At the same time, the room went dark, only giving him the ability to sit straight back down in his seat. The music became louder, distorted, the flashing lights brightening the room and then disappearing, flames on the stage rising towards the unseen ceiling. Then rain began to fall on the stage, sheets of hard rain between the flames on either side of the platform. As everyone stared ahead, mesmerized, a dark figure entered from the center of the stage. It was clear to Shawn. The shadows being cast were those of a well-formed, long, lean, curvy woman. As she exposed herself through the rain at the edge of the stage, the crowd erupted for the first time. The woman was attractive and confident. Still, it seemed the crowd was cheering more for something other than that. She represented something to this crowd. As she moved from the center stage to Shawn's right, her features became clearer, and for the briefest of moments, he thought he had seen her somewhere before, somewhere in his past. Struggling to place the woman on stage and watching as the crowd reacted to her every move and gesture, sometime during the show, the music had taken on a more sadistic tone, and now others were joining the woman he assumed to be the Slayer, appearing to be devils or beasts as they circled, moving in with guarded anticipation. From out of thin air, now she held a large revolver, something Clint Eastwood would have been proud of. The shots rang throughout. Shawn watched as each beast fell to the ground. For reasons unknown to him, Shawn jumped to his feet, frozen in place, no one seeming to notice, other than the woman with the gun. With the agility, skill, and grace of a cat, she was off the stage and directly in front of him somehow, gun pointed directly at his head. While time stood still, a memory flashed in his mind 3 times quickly. It was the same flash each time, only by the 3rd time it was clearer. Though still dimly lit and covered with shadows, those features he finally recognized, she was the one that had shot him once before. Legs frozen to the concrete floor, body not able to move, he watched as the fire exploded the end of the weapon. Shawn closed his eyes and waited for the impact. It was a dream that would repeat itself throughout his struggle. That concludes episode 6. I hope you're enjoying the journey and will join me next week as we continue our story. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen. Have a great day.